Hello, everyone. Good evening here from Los Angeles. For some of you who are joining us from around the world, good morning and good afternoon. Welcome to University of the West Annual International Education and Interfaith Celebration. We have for you today a very special discussion on interfaith dialogue, co-organized by the University of the West Department of Religious Studies, chaired by Dr. Shakia, and the RAL Graduate Council, led by Bante Serenada. Our featured guests tonight are a group of accomplished educators, community leaders, and spiritual advisors. Before I give our guest panelists their proper introductions, I want to invite the president of the University of the West, Dr. Min-Hua Ta, to give us tonight's opening remarks. Dr. Ta.
Good. Thank you, Fong. And good evening, honorable guests, faculty, students, and community members. It is very nice to see all of you here, and thank you for spending time with us this evening. First, I would like to thank you, the Chaplaincy Club, particularly Fong Sam, for organizing the panel discussion, and Reverend Jisujo, Chair of the Buddhist Chaplaincy Department, for your ongoing leadership. It is our honor to have speakers represent different faiths and from around the world to share their perspective of this interesting and timely topic. In the last many decades, we have witnessed almost daily human migration from one country to another due to many push and pull factors. As our community has become more diverse and technology has enhanced more way of learning and communication, one would think that there would be more open dialogue among communities to understand each other and create a more harmonious world. On the contrary, we witness more violence in the name of religions. To name a few in recent history, the conflict between Bosnia and Kosovo in the early 90s, the Rohingya conflict in 2017, the ongoing Palestinian and Israeli conflict, and the Sunni and Shia in the Middle East, and even within the US, and in some smaller scale in recent years and recent days. These conflicts prompt me to raise two questions. What is the purpose of having a religious faith? Is it possible to separate religion and politics? Lastly, I want to leave you with a piece of reading by the Venerable Dr. in the book titled Living Buddha, Living Christ, where he touched on the topic of traditional root. He stated, if a Buddhist woman wants to marry a Christian man or vice versa, should we encourage them? The woman will have to learn and practice her husband's tradition, and the man will have to learn and practice his wife's tradition. Then instead of having just one spiritual root, they will have two. But can a person have two spiritual roots at the same time? Can both of them learn Christianity and Buddhism and practice both traditions? We know that when someone does not have any root, he or she will suffer tremendously. But what about the question of having more than one root? Can we allow young people of different tradition to marry each other freely without benediction? Can we encourage them to practice both tradition and enrich each other? Thank you again and enjoy the panel discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Ta, for those encouraging and supporting words and allowing us to have an event like this at University of the West. Next, I would like to invite the chair of the Religious Studies Department, Dr. Shakia, to give us a few words about the program and about tonight's event. And just for emphasis, this event is organized by this department, and we're very lucky to have a chair who give us the proper support and give us the encouragement to hold events like this. Dr. Shakia.
Thank you, Fong. Good evening, everybody. On behalf of Department of Religious Study and the Religious Graduate Council, we would like to extend our warmest welcome and good wishes to all. Bridging the gap is certainly a timely and enduring topic that resonates with current national and global issues and challenges facing our world. Today, we have a wonderful opportunity to explore ways in which to deepen interreligious dialogue. We are very fortunate to have us with this evening the 5 panelists, Dr. Kamal Abu-Shamsieh, Venerable Juewei, Dr. Jon Paulien, Dr. George Lee, and Rabbi Mei Yong from the different religious traditions. I believe this dialogue will enable us to build upon our network of collaboration, understanding mutual self-esteem and respect. I want to thank all the panelists and our MA student Fong Sam for organizing this event and assembling such a distinguished panel of experts and moderating this panel. So please accept my best wishes for a successful and fruitful dialogue. Have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shakya. And now to our featured program. As mentioned, our guests tonight include consummate professionals in their respective disciplines and faith traditions. I'd like to welcome Dr. Kamal Abu-Shamsieh. He is the Director of Interreligious Chaplaincy Program, as well as Assistant Professor of Practical Theology at the Graduate Theological Union in Berkeley, California. Welcome, Kamal.
Thank you.
We have Venerable Dr. Juewei. She is the head of Humanistic Buddhism program at Tien Institute in Sydney, Australia. She's also the acting head of program for Applied Buddhist Studies, as well as the director of the Humanistic Buddhism Center and the senior lecturer. Venerable, you have too many titles.
Sorry.
Next, we have Dr. Jon Paulien. He is professor of religion at Loma University. Thanks for joining us. And we have Dr. George Lee, a clinical psychologist, as well as a lecturer at the Center of Buddhist Studies at the University of Hong Kong. And last but not least, Rabbi Mei Yong of the Academy of Jewish Religion, California. Welcome all. Thank you for being here. Before we begin, a little housekeeping. For the attendees in the audience, you can see that we have disabled the microphone, but please feel free to use the chat feature. Comments, feedback, and questions are all welcome. I'll occasionally look over and see if there's any relevant thing in the chat, and I'll bring it and present it to the panelists here. So please. And now, without further ado, let's get into it, shall we? Let's, when we met last night to do sort of a sound check, Venerable Juewei brought up a very good starting point for us tonight. And that is to define what we mean with this title, Bridging the Gap. What is the gap? And is there a gap? Venerable, would you want to tackle that question first?
Well, let me just start by saying that thank you so much, Fong, for organizing this session for us to get together. It's an opportunity to meet old friends and to make new friends too. So your title, Bridging the Gap, was quite intriguing. So first thing I was asking is, so what is the gap? There are gaps where we can talk about the difference between what may be ideal and what's reality. So for us Buddhists, we think of this shore and the other shore. Maybe on the other shore is the utopia, whether it could be the pure land or heaven. And here we have stuck in terms of life on earth. So there is a gap. Another gap that I see may exist is a divide between two or more groups. So there's a divide. So a you versus a me. So this gap we discussed yesterday could be in terms of perhaps economic gap, cultural gap, gender gap, ethnic gap, and you mentioned also generational gap. So there are these possible gaps. And I see that what we're looking at is bridging the gaps, because bridges close gaps, it links. For example, this shore to the other shore, there's a bridge. It helps us to communicate. So I thought that this may be an opportunity for us to just talk about what gaps may exist, and more importantly is what religions can do. I raised the fact that all religions, I think, are facing what I may call, thanks to the pandemic, an existential crisis. Why do we need to exist in this secular or post-secular world? And we are all in it together, in the sense of having to find our foot. I think Dr. Ta, President Ta, asked some very, very pertinent questions this evening around why would people, well, of course they need faith, but what's the purpose of having religious faith? And I would like to invite, I think, all of us perhaps to brainstorm around President Ta's question, I think her challenge to us about how we can remain relevant in a world where the suffering now is not just individual but systemic. It's systemic suffering that I can see. What the internet is doing to us, this free, what looks like free access, is at the cost of our privacy. And now in its wake, we have mental health issues, addiction, both young and old, the cyberbullying and internet scams. But at the same time, I feel that such crisis is good because necessity becomes the mother of invention. It allows us now to come forward, and perhaps could we share some of what we are doing in this new kind of collective consciousness, and recognizing that, of course, the old normal is gone. We are now left with just a new normal, and old habits will not fit.
Let me ask Kamal. Kamal, in this new normal, do we need religion?
Absolutely. The gap that we have, and we reflect on it from an Islamic perspective, it's can be personal, within the gaps within each one of us that disconnect us from who we are and disconnect us from our capabilities. We have definitely a disconnect with other people that include family members and humanity at large. And the most severe one is our gap and disconnect with God. We are here to serve humanity as a way of servicing God. So that gap is, to me, is the most important one to discover. What are the ways that God wanted us to behave? What are the ways that want us to demonstrate our ethics, respect the laws that we have, and respect the divine laws that sent to humanity and the different paths that we have. Reflecting on all of that, I can share that it is something that we find strength when we come together here this evening, and thank you to the University of the West and all the organizers, that we find strength in joining together and in remembering that we are together connected and we are interdependent. So we cannot do it alone as one faith community. We have to work together. We have to bridge the gap together. It's, for me, a way of serving God as well.
John, to that point, there in the recent statistics that I saw, there are more people now who are identifying as non-religious. So with that said, being the majority not religious, how can each of our faith play a role in helping close divides, separations?
Well, I think what has really been significant for me in the conversations that we've been having is that in traditionally an interfaith dialogue is one where we talk among ourselves and we identify what we agree on, what we disagree on, who maybe has a better idea, who is more problematic, whatever. We have these kind of discussions. But I think what is happening here, when you see bars being open and houses of worship being closed, you get the impression that the wider society is judging that religion is not essential. And in that context, we have much more in common than what keeps us apart. In other words, we're in this together. And I think what for me has been significant with this group of people is the realization that what COVID has done is create a situation in which, as one person said, if we don't hang together, we will hang separately. And I think it is our corporate commission, our corporate need, that we be able to make a common, shall we say, a common appeal to the world that makes it clear that religion makes a difference. I mean, for me personally, a world without religion be a cold, dark, and very isolated place, which is the opposite of what people need today. And I think perhaps we can begin with this conversation to articulate how faith truly is essential, even in a society that does not now recognize that.
Rabbi Mel, you work with a lot of young people, students. What do you see among that demographics as far as their affinity to religion?
Again, first, let me just thank you, Fong, for the privilege and opportunity to be part of this panel, esteemed panel. Yes, as one who's been an educator most of his life, and one who now speaks in front of high school students and community college students, there is a hunger, there is a thirst for knowing other faiths, other traditions. I think that as a result of what the Venerable spoke about, is that there is a blessing and a curse with social media. In other words, with the democratization of information and information not being synonymous with knowledge, there is a curiosity that is out there to discover beyond stereotypes what our affiliations are all about. Okay, just being a member here, I would yearn to learn more about each one of the individuals as part of the panel of their tradition, of their practices. And the young people, I strongly believe, are very curious also. Unfortunately, we have, I would say, at times, healthy competition and unhealthy competition. Unhealthy being what may be publicized that is misinformation, rumors, stereotypes, and today with that kind of openness, with just as represented today here in real time, the world has become smaller. We have someone in Australia, we have someone in Hong Kong. You know, for someone who started as a public educator as with a blackboard, not a whiteboard, it symbolizes where we've come to. And I think if some way we can break down those barriers of misunderstanding, of being the cheerleaders of our faiths, and the synergy that I know will be demonstrated this evening or this morning, wherever you may be, by our different traditions, I only see a positive outcome. May I say, in the Jewish tradition, we have a saying: life is a narrow bridge. Don't be fearful. Don't be scared about it. But that's, at times, we need support, and one of those supports can be our religious backgrounds. Okay, I think locally and globally, as represented here, one's religious affiliation, and I'll speak to you from the Judaic tradition: community, community, community. You know, when we pray, we have to, in a community, we have 10 or more individuals. Okay, the collective entity is significant, and I think for us here, to bridge that gap means that I see interfaith not as a noun, but as a verb.
George, you do a lot of work at the intersection of Buddhism and psychology. And in a conversation we had a couple of weeks ago, I had mentioned that I feel psychology could be a pathway to understanding differences. And you quickly, you graciously agreed with me, but then said that it's really suffering that connects us all. But let me rephrase my original thinking. Is the psychology of suffering is what will ultimately connect us all?
Thank you for the good question. And first of all, thank you so much for this great opportunity for me to join this panel and be working with all those experts and seeing my old friends from the University of the West. And to answer Fong's question, I want to start by showing you something. What do you think it is? It's actually a little bit of soy milk in an empty cup. I'm not going to talk about, do you see the glass as half empty or half full? I'm going to talk about how foolish I feel that just now I was waiting to start. You see that I was busy doing something. I was actually like heedlessly hit the cup and the soy milk poured over on my books and computer. I was really busy cleaning it. So on the way of cleaning it, one thing I found was, like there's some books that I have not touched for a long time. And one thing I found was actually a book called Jesus and the Buddha and their commentaries and contrast. So I find this experience very interesting, you know, to answer Fong's question. Like I remember the discussion we had a few weeks ago, and I also was intrigued by all the comments from all the presenters in front of me about how we are all more interconnected than we think, about how we are actually drawn by some common suffering that we should work together to reduce them. I actually think from an understanding of psychology, also in Buddhism, we are born to be pretty self-centered people. When we see others people, we actually are driven by certain kind of concepts, stereotypes, and we quickly determine, are you one of us or are you not one of us? We make the differentiation very quickly. But while we make the differentiation, when we perceive people that are not from our tradition, our religion, our faith and lineage, we easily shut down ourselves and pretend to be maybe more confident, to be better, to put ourselves in a more like defensive mode. When we do that, I think this is the starting point of creating a gap. When we are doing that, we lost touch with our deepest, more vulnerable part. If we look across all the faith and religion and in psychology, I think one very common ground is we are all suffering individuals. We all have our problems. We all have our mindless moments. So for me, one way that I can think is at this moment, I'm a psychologist, I'm a lecturer, I'm a panelist, but I would just so mindlessly hit my soy milk and pour over everything. And I was busy cleaning, don't know what was happening for some time. But one choice is I can just act cool and pretend that I'm calm and I'm that like psychologist, lecturer and answering that question. Or I can be courageous and faithful enough in my trust in the deepest human being, which is we all have the loving and compassionate part. And if we can let that part guide us to show our vulnerability, our suffering, our problems, and be honest and genuine to share that with all the people we trust around me, just like how I'm sharing this shameful moments with the 46 of you. I think this is the starting point of connection. I think this is the starting point for us to think about what may be a better interconnectedness, just like how a problem like that led me to see Jesus and the Buddha. And some part of this book actually talk about more and more commentaries would imagine that if Jesus and the Buddha are living at the same time, they would have a lot of respect of each other's teachings. And I think this is a attitude that we can start thinking about, having courage to let us be in touch with our deepest suffering and vulnerability and use that as a compassionate tool to connect with other people so that we can create a common good for peace and acceptance.
You know, George, seeing that book reminds me of what Dwayne Bidwell from Claremont School of Theology said in one of his books, or it's actually the title of his book, One Religion is Not Enough, or One God is Not Enough, rather. How do you feel about that, John?
Well, I think coming from a Christian perspective, and I should just mention for those who don't know, Loma Linda University is in the Seventh-day Adventist tradition. And the Seventh-day Adventists are a branch of Christianity that has quite a bit in common with the world religions. For example, we keep the Sabbath along with our Jewish friends, and with our Muslim friends, we don't encourage alcohol. We live our lives in the context of the judgment, and with our Buddhist friends, we encourage a plant-based diet. So coming out of that perspective, we, I think, are inclined to reach out and find the common ground. Now, would you kindly rephrase the question, because I was heading somewhere and I lost it?
I had mentioned that Dwayne Bidwell from the Claremont School of Theology wrote a book that says that in today's society, often one God is not enough, one religion is not enough.
Okay, thank you. So coming from that Christian perspective is the understanding that there is a Holy Spirit who is the presence of God everywhere, and that from the Seventh-day Adventist background, all truth is God's truth. And human beings express what they know of God's truth, and sometimes it's mixed with other things as well. But I think what that would encourage me to do, and those who feel likewise to me, is to seek what is God's Spirit doing in the other? How is God working out in your life? What is the truth that you have come to see from God that I can learn from? I think often we look for what's wrong in the other. And I think when we have a perspective that, that God is truly caring about everyone, and that God is willing to communicate with anyone, I think these interfaith conversations can be much more fruitful.
Thank you. Kamal, I believe that there's a big misconception about the Islamic faith, and that Islam is incredibly inclusive. And for example, isn't the Buddha considered a prophet in Islam?
I don't know specifically if the mention of the Buddha is in the Quran or not. It's not. Yet we've been told that every community received a prophet. And in that sense, those who lead to the path of God are prophets. And that's the inclusive call. That's number one. The second one, recognizing the pluralism and the diversity and the different paths towards God. As Jan mentioned, all truth leads to one God, and it is the divine truth. We attempt to understand it, and sometimes our understanding will be inconsistent with what God is. So we strive in this life to lead an ethical life. However, sometimes we confuse happiness with desire, and we let go of the significance in our life, those who are the living in the shadows. While we were talking among ourselves yesterday, I did mention that today it's ironic that we're erecting many temples, houses of worships, mosques, empty buildings today that are cold, collecting dust, while people are still on the streets living. I don't think that's a way of life that is compatible with God. When we have homelessness, when we see on our southern borders, people are put in cages, that's not a way of life that is compatible with God. We have a call to live an ethical life, each according to their own religious tradition, and what bound us is much more than what tear us apart, if that's even a correct metaphor to use. I think the uniqueness and of each faith tradition, the beauty of every faith tradition shine, and when it shines upon the whole universe, and we have to accept that and to live that, embrace the diversity and celebrate it.
May I share an observation?
Absolutely.
Yes, I think George has mentioned something about connectivity, connection. We live in a world where, as represented here today, we can connect virtually. But unfortunately, I think some of us, individually or as part of a group, the connection gets subordinated to convincing others rather than respect, mutual respect. The fact that we can agree to disagree doesn't, for some, become a code of ethics, if you wish. And so I think one of the challenges of bridging the gap is to begin to reflect whatever tradition that you may adhere to, that we have the privilege in the 21st century world to be connected in so many different ways. All right, the young generation today wouldn't know what a rotary phone looks like, wouldn't know if it rang, a rotary phone rang today, they wouldn't know what that symbol of that ring would mean. They have other ways to communicate. But I think that one of the roles of we as clergy people or those involved with faith affiliation is to connect, but also to respect and to understand that each one of us has that light from God within us, and that each one of us may take different paths to reach that ultimate connection in the Jewish tradition, we say Hashem, the name God, and to learn from that and to be energized from that. So Fong, I just wanted to share that because I think there's some beautiful foundations of statements here that are being shared by others that could lead to multiple panel discussions.
I agree, and you mentioned the respecting our each other's differences, and I want to ask George this. You know, the word interfaith, the root of that word is faith, and another word for faith is trust. Right? Is the widening of the gap, the breakdown of trust, and you know, last week President Obama was on 60 Minutes, and he mentioned the concept of truth decay. You know, first I had to listen and make sure he didn't mean tooth decay, but truth decay is a real thing, right? The truth between people, truth between institutions are eroding.
I guess one thing that as a psychologist learning Buddhism and becoming Buddhist, and now my main work is about Buddhist counseling, which is to integrate early Buddhist teaching into a counseling model so that even though people are not religious, even though people don't know about Buddhism, can benefit from that approach. So that idea of faith is actually something that I've been thinking about too. And besides trust, I think one way that I would define faith is confidence, believing in something, like trusting that it will work. And I think it is not just, at least from my understanding, from my Buddhist training, it's not just to believe there are Buddhas, Bodhisattva, who would have the blessings and arrange some way for me to go. It is to believe that from my understanding of the doctrines, of the teaching, the way that I do it, how I practice, how I breathe, how I talk to people, how I listen, how I face suffering, those kind of practices will be beneficial for me and will be wholesome. And along with that, I think it's a lot about that internal empirical experience. So, I mean, like, sometimes when all of us are suffering. All of us have a lot of different kind of emotional bodily pain, a lot of wants that we don't get, a lot of things that we thought that when we are able to do it, get it, then things will be fine. But in fact, if we turn back to our mind and our heart, if we be honest to ourselves and sit with those feelings and observe, we will realize that when we think, act, or chooses things in a different way, it will come back with a different result. So this is my understanding of karma, for example. So when having examined ourselves, having looked at ourselves and knowing that those kind of thinking decisions, say like hating people versus being compassionate to people, being compassionate to people will make me happier, then that reward, that positive reinforcement will make me have more faith in the practice and keep on going on like that. So I actually think faith to me is not just the belief in Buddhas, Bodhisattva, God, or other higher spirits. It's also about, do I have the confidence in knowing what I'm doing, and along with the way of practicing to know, this works, so I do more. This works, so I do better. So I think it is an internal strength to match with the external faith. Don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, you did. But Venerable Juewei, I saw a panel that you were involved in last month, and in which you mentioned that you don't know much about politics. So I thought it'd be perfect to ask you a political question. And seeing that you're in Australia, it'd be perfect to ask you about American politics. Joe Biden said that a couple of weeks ago that his reason for running for president was to save the soul of America. My question to you is, can America's soul be saved through politics?
I told you, I don't know very much about politics, but the US election really had many of us staying up late. I think that, why don't I go back to, again, rather than to talk about the soul of America being saved, I think it's the soul of humanity. America does not exist in isolation. I think America exists together with all other countries around the world, together with us, Australia here, China, and all the countries that are represented in this Zoom meeting. I feel that faith, and back to again, President Ta's question, I think faith is so important. I think what this pandemic has shown to us is that we, all of us, are intrinsically equal because we are all brothers and sisters in suffering. When there is a US election, even us down under, we are following it together with you. I think our heartbeats are moving together. We all now place our faith in Joe Biden to give us, I guess, a more awakened consciousness around the world. I like George's definition of faith as confidence. I think it's faith in humanity. Faith in humanity. Faith in the fact that we all can come together in times like this in compassion, because compassion literally means suffering with. So we suffer together in this pandemic. We suffer together with these empty religious buildings and many people made homeless as a result of losing their jobs. We suffer together with this truth decay, because I think as religious practitioners, we are here because we are after the truth. We want to know more about what's true, and we want to listen deeply to one another to identify our fabrics of truth and mend that fabric of society together. So I'm not sure I'm answering your question because I'm really not a politician. I don't know how to take things along a political dimension, Fong. But I hope that at least I can express what I feel is important in terms of the purpose of having religious faith during this time. And I know it has helped me personally a lot.
Kamal, you have something to say?
Yeah, I just would like to lift up the voices of those who are not Democrats and Republicans, those who did not vote, and those who are not citizens and did not participate yet are affected by the policies. Lift up the voices of those who are not Judeo-Christian or Abrahamic and those who are not recognized. Uplift up the voices of those who don't belong to a faith tradition, those who are spiritual but not religious. There are so many people who are not represented because we tend to look at the common denominator. Yet, as everyone on this panel mentioned, the faith in humanity and the faith in the goodness of each one of us is the most important foundation that we have. And it's about time to join together, bridging the gap, to work together for the betterment of humanity. And that is the true essence of leadership and faith.
Can I say,
Yeah, jump in.
with this, yeah, you know, the pandemic has, in a way, shared with us that political clout can't necessarily be the panacea for many communities. It is known that many religious faith communities have had to reach out to political entities and have provided support for those political entities in order to eliminate, as Venerable would say, the suffering that we see so much in our communities. So there has demonstrated for us, you know, in the last 6 months, we have that political sphere and we have the religious sphere, and they've come together where it's needed in order to support communities. It's like one can't do without the other. And because when I hear the soul of America, to be quite honest with you, Fong, I didn't see that in a political realm. For me, politics is the distribution of power, how power is distributed. I'd like to think that soul that we're talking about is the light that's in each and every one of us as clergy people, but from all our communities, and how we can ensure that light can reign in such a way to diminish the darkness, because I think each one of us know people that are in isolation, social isolation, and with social isolation comes spiritual desperation. And so I know I'm talking and one comment leads to another, but I had to share my remarks regarding what I think about the soul of America. I don't necessarily see that as mutually exclusive of the religious realm. Also, I'd like to chime in too, is that in Hebrew, we use the word emunah to describe faith, when it literally means reliability, dependability. And I think that goes along with the other traditions that mentioned about having confidence. And in the world we live in today is in such a moment where it's hard to have a little bit of that confidence today.
Yeah, I'd like to take this just in a slightly different direction. I think this has been very, very helpful. I think one of the things that maybe we have to confront at some point is that if we're going to address the truth decay, if we're going to address the fate of religion in today's world, we have to recognize that all of us are sitting on the legacy of the history of religion. And the reality is that when you look at the history of religion, there's a lot of stuff that's not very pretty there. Just speaking from a Christian perspective, you have apartheid in South Africa, you have Bosnia, you have the Inquisition, you have the Crusades. Some would suggest even the Holocaust, because certainly many of those that perpetrated that considered themselves Christians. And one of the reasons that religion is not taken seriously in today's world, and I'm just speaking from my own tradition, but perhaps all of us can look at similar histories. The reality is when you look back at that, it's not surprising that some people have said, religion is not for me, because ultimately that trust, that emunah in the Hebrew, that confidence resides in God. And when people look at religion, they say they're representing God. And who's the God of Auschwitz? Who is the God of the Inquisition? Is that a God you would want to know? You see, so I think ultimately, one thing that desperately needs clarification is the picture of God and the picture of faith and the picture of trust that we have. And I think for many people, they look at the history of religion and say, it's not for me. And yet we who have seen the more beautiful side of religion do have that to overcome in this conversation.
Yeah, and to that point, we can't escape politics, can we? And Rabbi Mel brought up power, and I want to connect the dots to what Venerable Juewei said earlier about equality. Now, there's a big difference between equality and equity, right? And I'll bring this up. In promoting this event, I had a comment from someone about the equity of the panel. And as you can see, there's 5 of you, and there's 1 woman and 4 men. I actually want to hear from you what you think about that. And it's not just the gender, ratio, but there's also the ethnic ratio as well, and the nationality ratio. So I want to hear what your thoughts when you were invited to this panel, and I'm gracious that you accepted. But now I want to hear from you. Anyone, jump in. Well, let's start with Venerable. Your presence here prompted this comment from someone on social media. So.
Oh, really? Well, this doesn't really occur to me very much because, first of all, I should tell you, I'm the minority of the minority of the minority where I am. Because first, because I'm of the female gender, but second, because I'm a monastic. So there are more lay people than monastic anyway. Buddhist, Chinese. So in a way, I'm very used to being in a minority background. And I'm also more technical in a place that's supposed to be more humanities-based. I'm used to being a minority, so it didn't really occur to me. So that's something I always try to see the equality in the nature of things rather than to look for the differences. So in my mind, I constantly try to look for what's common among us. So I look at community, the word that Mel used a lot. And I see that we are here in a community. In a community, there must be diversity. We don't have to be represented in equal proportions for that to take place. We are still in this community together.
That's fascinating, because I also heard you speak in another panel about human rights, and that, yes, that Buddhism didn't begin to embrace human rights until fairly recently, with engaged Buddhism, now humanistic Buddhism, but it wasn't not necessarily a tenet that is addressed. And Mel, what do you think about equity versus equality?
Speak to me. Sorry.
What are your thoughts on equity versus equality? What does that look like to you?
Well, access. When we talk about equity, for me, that is, are the doors open? Okay. Equality, is something that we all strive for. I see American history as different chapters of people attaining what we consider to be equality. As a faith leader, as a clergy person, I am totally committed to removing barriers for human potential. And when there are barriers for human potential, equity cannot take place. Okay, you're not even getting through the door. You're not even getting that opportunity. And I think all of us here in our own communities, I can say as a Reform rabbi, the thrill that I see where there are more women rabbis on the bima, on the pulpit. Okay, there are more women cantors that you can see. Something that my parents never would have dreamed about just a generation ago. So I think from my seat, I'd like to think that equity talks about access, that opportunity, and to open the doors. And I know some traditions, are working through that right now. And I think the diversity that reigns in this country. I think one of the divisiveness is that the reality is that in some communities, the Anglo or the white man is not necessarily the majority any longer. Demographics have shifted. And for me, that's an energizing aspect of being part of this country, because if this country didn't open the doors to my parents, I would not be here speaking with you today.
Kamal, speak to that. Speak in terms of access, and we've had and it's an ongoing episode in its ugliness when it comes to Islamophobia.
People are fearful of the unknown, and that's a human nature. So that's in one aspect that requires me and many and all of us actually to work together to demystify the unknown and to look deeper into what we're doing. And this is not the beginning. We come to this panel on the shoulders of many others, and Los Angeles has been a leader in interfaith in many aspects. There are many leaders who came before us, and we continue to do this work. And it's not a matter of inviting a Muslim to be on the panel. All of you can represent Islam in that sense. The matter of, as long as we keep the interests of humanity together, the collective wisdom of the group here represents humanity in that sense. It's not a matter of having a Muslim on every panel or a male of every panel to make sure that the male voices are, for me, you represent me in every aspect. And it's an honor for me that you can speak about Islam as a scholar or Buddhism. You don't have to be a Muslim to speak about Islam. However, when we see injustice, it becomes our collective responsibility to speak up. And the history lesson that you gave us, Jan, in terms of injustices that took across history, and in the opening remarks of Dr. Ta is about our collective responsibility to work together for justice. That is a collective call, that is a faith call, represent every tradition.
Thank you. I've learned so much just listening to all of you, and I can listen to all of you forever. Unfortunately, we do have a time limit, and I wanted to save some time at the end here for final remarks and for each of you to talk about the work that you're doing. How about we start with George?
Hi, so I'm now working at the University of Hong Kong, and we just founded I think maybe the first Master of Buddhist Counseling program in nearby Asian countries. So like I said, this is a program that we try to use the modality of Western counseling while substitute the theories, the training and concepts with our Buddhist understanding, so that when people go to counseling, hopefully in near future, besides going to a CBT therapist, a psychodynamic therapist, they can choose, oh, okay, we can go to a Buddhist counselor who not just doing counseling, but able to do some Dhamma talk, able to teach Buddhist meditation, and able to be trained better in doing palliative care, hospital visits, or elderly home visits. So this is the thing that we are doing. And personally, my research interest is to continue my long-term goal to integrate Buddhism into a counseling model. And for now, the little steps that I made, including publishing some papers on that topic and working on my book called The Guide to Buddhist Counseling. Hopefully it can be done in 2 years. And if it's done, then I will send a bunch of copies to University of the West to thank this very important route that I come from. So besides that, I think another thing I do is to do talks and presentations. And hopefully, like Mel said about how the community is very important. And so many people, like Kamal said, they are just afraid of things that they don't know. And I think that interpersonal experience, the presence of us, the compassion of us, to at least for some people who are curious, to let them know, this is not something scary. This is all about suffering, compassion, and confidence. And we can work together to make each other feel better. So this is the other part of thing that I do. Just go talk to people, present what I think, and listen to them. Thank you.
Well, looking forward to your book. John, what are you working on? By the way, John has a fantastic blog about dealing with apocalyptic issues. John, take it away.
Okay, well, I wasn't going to go there, but if anybody's interested in that, I'm doing an online commentary on the Book of Revelation, which is the last book of the Bible, and speaks about end time events and so on. There's lots of people who how should we say, have some wild ideas that come from that, and just trying to bring a little sanity into the discussion. I don't know anybody else has ever tried to do an online commentary on the Book of Revelation before. So that's my one of the personal things that I'm doing. But I was just going to say, for Loma Linda University is a health science university in the Seventh-day Adventist Christian faith tradition. And the central core of that mission is healing rather than curing. In other words, rather than curing diseases, curing bodies, healing the whole person, to develop within medicine, dentistry, pharmacy, nursing, etc., a sense of whole people, and to train people. We have a chaplaincy program as well, George, and the idea is to train people to see the whole person and to discover what story that person has that maybe the doctor would never hear. But a Loma Linda doctor is looking for that story, you see, and training people to see the whole person and to heal the whole person. And we kind of see that as a down payment on the future that we envision God has for all of us.
Thanks for sharing that. And by the way, I enjoy your formulation of the stages of faith, and you need to trademark Dark Night of the Soul. That's okay. Mel, what do you have for us for parting thoughts?
Yes, John, I want to thank you about sharing what the great work of Loma Linda and treating the whole patient. I'm a recent arrival to Portland, Oregon, as Fong and I were reminiscing about where we used to live and the restaurants that we congregated at. I think I know Fong in another life. We think we know each other. But John, I so appreciate what you said. I'm a recent arrival. I really haven't got my feet on the ground here in my new community because I've been impacted in the last 18 months with two very serious cancer surgeries to remove some cancer from me. And I will tell you this, that the presence of others that would come to visit me was very significant, and the doctors that treated me as a whole patient is something that really helps the healing process. So I wanted to react to what John has to say. Also, I have to let you know, talking about equity and gender, my last surgery, the predominant gender was female, and the predominant doctors that visited me were female. So I just want to say that it was energizing to see that that kind of demographic shift in that profession also. But I look forward, Fong, to contribute to my community and outreach, to work through some of the interfaith action that's taking place, which I think is essential. As I said before, I don't believe politics has the answer to everything, okay? I think, just as what John's saying about the whole person, I think we as clergy people can contribute that to the conversation. And so I look forward to continue to teach. I was a public school educator for 36 years. This is another opportunity for me to reach people from all demographic profiles and from all traditions, because I teach classes on Judaism, and it's open door. No one checks your faith card when you come on in. So again, Fong, thank you for this wonderful opportunity.
Thanks, Mel. Thanks for being you, and may you be blessed with good health. We're glad you beat that terrible disease. Venerable Juewei, what do you have for us?
Yes, here at Tien Institute Down Under, we have the world's first graduate certificate in Humanistic Buddhism. And I see it as a way for us to connect to the values of humanity, something I feel that all religions, all faiths do very well. And that is to bring us back to the goodness of humanity in order to face so much suffering in the world and to give us the confidence to move ahead. So that's the teaching program. But also at the same time, we have some research and development work going on. We do a journal translation project using crowdsourced volunteers from around the world to help us translate journal articles from Chinese into English, especially humanistic Buddhism related articles. So they are now published in journal.nantien.edu.au. We are into our 4th year. I'm very grateful to all the volunteers around the world. Then this year, we are in our 2nd year of developing a bibliography visualizer. So again, if you're interested in throwing your bibliographies into a visualizer to see what your bibliographies look like in terms of time and space and keywords, it's a free tool. You're welcome to use it on visualizer.nantien.edu.au. But something that also keeps me going and allowing me to understand better what's going on around me is the Communities of Practice project. We call it a check-in. So every Sunday for half an hour, 11 to 11:30 Sydney time, we come together for half an hour just for the community to check on one another. We break out into groups and we find out how everyone is doing in the past week. It develops a habit for us to inculcate these reflective pauses and also to deeply listen to one another. And I find it it's such a powerful way for us to get in touch again and let that light of the community shine, especially during times like these when many people may be suffering from various isolation-related issues. So I also welcome you to join us on communities.nantien.edu.au if you have a chance. So thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Venerable. I have seen the visualizer and it's very impressive. And for everyone who's listening and who are interested in the work of our panelists here tonight, we can make that information available if it's all right with our guests. If people want to connect with you professionally and talk about what we're talking about tonight. And Kamal, your turn. Tell us what you're doing.
Well, I graduated from the Graduate Theological Union last October and joined as director of the Interreligious Chaplaincy program. We focus on minorities in chaplaincy, in particular Islam, Hinduism, and Judaism, and we approach chaplaincy in a multi-religious aspect. This program joins the Buddhist chaplaincy at the Graduate Theological Union and the Shaw Institute for Chaplaincy. So we have 5 traditions approaches to chaplaincy. Before that, I'm the founder of Ziyara Muslim Spiritual Care, and the focus of Ziyara is international in the sense of training or bringing chaplaincy into the Arab and Muslim world. So I train Saudi Arabia, Malaysia, Indonesia, and many other countries. And in the US, responding to the need for having Muslim chaplains in the different aspects of the society. Once again, thank you for having me on this panel, and hope that we can continue the dialogue later in the future as well.
Thank you to our panelists. Unfortunately, our time is limited, and there's so much more to cover, so much more that we can discuss, and so much more work to do. But hopefully this is a engaging conversation for everyone, that's thought-provoking, and hopefully this will spur more conversations. So thanks to everyone for being here. I want to invite University of the West Enrollment Outreach Counselor Melanie Manzano to say a few words before we sign off.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Thank you to the panel and the University of the West organizers for this event. My name is Melanie Manzano, and I am the university's Enrollment Outreach Counselor. If you enjoyed tonight's event and are interested in more programs like this, or maybe even a more formal study of religion or chaplaincy, I want to invite you to check out the University of the West, as we have excellent graduate programs, including those with an emphasis on Buddhist study and Buddhist chaplaincy. We are accepting applications for spring and fall of 2021. I'll put my contact info in the chat, as well as links to our religious studies and chaplaincy programs. Even if you'd just like to know more, please feel free to contact me and I'll reply to you right away. Thank you so much for your time and interest.
Thanks, Melanie. I want to thank our guests again for being here tonight. Today's program would not have been possible without the support and guidance of Dr. Marosh Shaki and the Department of Religious Studies and the REL Graduate Council. Special thanks goes to President Ta, to Vanessa Karam, to Dr. Jane Iwamura, and the entire Buddhist Chaplaincy Department. Huge thanks to Raphael Wu, who is the Director of Information Technology, and he helped make this possible tonight. And on a personal note, I want to thank my partner in life and spiritual soulmate for being my constant rock, J Infinity. Yeah, boo-boo. Thank you everyone for watching. Until next time, be safe and be happy.
Bye.